This week on Hands on Photography, I'm going to challenge you with curiosity because you guys have just sent in some feedback and I can't wait to talk about it. And we're going to build on previous episodes with this week's tutorial, the Curves tool. Hands on Photography is brought to you from LastPass Studios. Using the same password everywhere is a security nightmare waiting to happen. LastPass easily creates unique passwords for every site. Visit lastpass.com/twit.
This is TWiT.
This episode of Hands on Photography is brought to you by Masterclass. Get unlimited access to every masterclass and get 15% off the annual all access pass at masterclass.com/hop. Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Hands on Photography here at TWiT.tv and the wonderful LastPass Studios. I am Ant Pruitt. Hope y'all are doing well. I'm unbelievable as always. As usual, I'm excited to be here with you on another fine Thursday to show you different tips and tricks regarding to the world of photography and everything that's going to help make you a better photographer, better photo editor, better just thinker outside of the box when you have that camera up to your face. This is going to be another fun show, another opportunity to build on the previous episodes and just continue our growth in this little world of life learning in the world of photography. Thank you guys for your continued support. And since you're finding this show right about now, go ahead and just take a second and hit the subscribe option in your favorite podcatcher of choice. And then go ahead and hit the share button so other folks can know what you're listening to and learn a little bit more about this fine podcast here at TWiT TV. Okay? Really do appreciate that. You can also check it out in the browser at twit.tv/hop. And there's a ton of different subscription options right there on that page, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Cast, YouTube channel, the whole 9 yards is what the kids used to say. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with this week's show. First up, I want to give you a little bit of news that I thought was fascinating. Mr. Victor, did you know Photoshop had a birthday yesterday?
Yes, I heard.
And then did you know it was 30 years old?
Yes, and it makes me feel very old.
Holy moly. I mean, so we think about, I look at say Windows and I look at Mac OS and Linux and all of those different systems and applications out there. And I get it that an operating system is going to be pretty long in the tooth and have all of this extra longevity, but I never really think about just software in general, such as something like Photoshop or Candy Crush or whatever these popular apps of today are. I never think about them being, decades old the way Photoshop is. That says a lot.
I think I started around 4.
Version 4?
Version 4. And it wasn't as good as it is now, but it was
right. And
it was still pretty powerful back
right,
then.
and a lot of people didn't know that Photoshop was more of a artistic and painting kind of application. Mm-hmm. They just later decided to bring in the ability to manipulate and post-process images. So it's a powerful, strong application. You talking about version 4, it was much later than that for me. I wrote about it more on my blog at antpruitt.com. They gave me a little bit of a preview at this virtual press event not too long ago, so I couldn't talk about some of the things that were going to be updated, but I put all of the information as far as updates to the app because of the birthday, new features and so forth for Photoshop, and it's pretty exciting. Still leveraging the power of AI and Adobe Sensei. I believe that's their flavor of AI, but it's pretty good stuff in there. Shout out to you, Adobe, and kudos for you continuing to have that longevity and being one of the industry standards in the world of photography and photo editing and photo finishing and photo compositing and just flat out creative arts. So that's
it. Is it the only program, other than Google it, like that's become a verb? Like,
well, see, I can't say that. Well, yeah, maybe you're right.
Yeah.
Google, yeah. Yeah, you put something together and become a verb. You build a noun and become a verb. You're doing something right.
You don't say like Macromedia flash it or anything, right?
So don't flash it. Yeah, that's That's pretty, yeah. Didn't think about that, sir. Good stuff. Good stuff. But yeah, shout out to Photoshop. Happy belated birthday, 30 years old. Next, I want to get into some feedback. We're going to have two sections of feedback, actually. First, I want to give a shout out to my man, Mr. Joseph. I hope I can pronounce your last name properly. Joseph Akbrud. Joe is a pretty prominent member in our TWiT community. That is twit.community in your browser of choice. And on Instagram, he is Byte for Byte. With a very, very, very nice Instagram feed. But he sent this photo over to me, and I wanted to share it with you all on the show. He shot me an email. He says, "Hey, I love the new show. Attached is one of my favorite pics taken at the Brooklyn Bridge in New York City on September 11th, 2019. And this was during a tribute down to show a tribute in Lower Manhattan for the folks that were involved in the September 11th attacks." And I'm gonna show you my screen here with his image. Whew, he shot this with this Canon 80D. This is a beautiful long exposure. I believe he said it took 13 seconds on this exposure. And he shot it on a wide angle lens at, I think it was up to 15 millimeter, no, 24 millimeter, but he went down to 14 mil so he can get a little bit wider on this shot. But I love this composition with the tribute lights going straight up the middle of the frame, and it has this sort of a tunnel and bullseye effect going on as he's taking a look down to Lower Manhattan. Great post-processing. You don't see hardly any noise in this image, and this is a compressed JPEG file, so the quality is still that super clean and super sharp. Seriously, Mr. Joe, I've been watching you post images inside of our TWiT community. And when I saw this in my email, quite frankly, I wasn't surprised that it came from you because, my man, you can shoot. You have an eye. You have an eye for composition, and you have an eye for post-processing. So my kudos to you. Thank you for sending this to me, and thank you for being a part of our community and sharing your images over there. So, folks, if you got Instagram, go ahead and hop on over there and give him a follow at Byte for Byte. Again, that's Byte for Byte on Instagram, and show him some love. Mr. Joe, thank you. Thank you so much for sending that over. All right, so now we're going to get into a little bit of nitty gritty. I gave you all a challenge. The challenge was a one-word challenge, okay? And that word was what, Mr. Victor? What was that word?
I think it was curiosity, right?
Okay, so curiosity. So I got some images in regarding the challenge, and I'm going to nitpick and critique and tell you my thoughts on these images. Two images, actually. One from one of you folks out there in the wonderful TWiT community, and another one from Mr. Victor.
I have my tissues ready over here.
Yep,
So
get them ready, brother. All right, so let's go ahead and pull up this shot on my screen here. This comes from Mr. Jeff Goldberg. He shot this in South Africa. I don't remember the type of bird this is, but this was his depiction of curiosity. I don't see curiosity when I look at this. I see a headshot. I see a bird out in nature. For me, nothing in this shot spoke to me about that animal being curious or anything around it being curious. Now, this is a nicely done photograph. The nice, beautiful shallow depth of field. Sharpness looks pretty good. Everything's in focus that should be in focus, even down to the eye. So, hey, Mr. Goldberg, I give you your props on that. But far as curiosity, I don't quite get that in this thing. Maybe the bird is looking back over its proverbial shoulder as in curiosity. Not sure, but if that's the case, maybe you can frame it a little bit differently. Expand the frame, make the bird appear a little bit larger and see its full body and not necessarily just a neck and head shot. I don't know, just a thought. What are your thoughts, Mr. Victor?
What I'm curious about is how there's green in the sky or up at the top.
Well, to me, I bet those are trees in the background, and
True.
that's water, like a lake or something behind it. You know what I'm saying?
I was like kind of wondering if it was like a Northern Lights kind of thing or something.
No.
That's what I would be curious about on this image.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I give you that.
That's a good point.
So Mr. Goldberg, he gives you a point for curiosity because he's worried about the background. Okay. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Nice sharp.
It's a nice quality photograph, but from a curiosity standpoint, I don't see it. I'll leave it up to our listeners in our chat room to let us know what they think, if they see anything about it. But I think the framing probably could have been a little bit different and, really shaped the story of curiosity a little bit better. But that's the point of these challenges. Give yourself one word and it'll really force you to think outside the box as far as getting your framing and your composition squared away to present that word, and in this case, curiosity. So now I want to hop on over to one more image. Mr. Victor. All right, so you can go ahead and show my screen now, sir. This image, how cute is it?
So this was taken a long time ago.
Okay, so that's why it looks like it was shot through a old VGA camera. Is that what that is?
Maybe not VGA, but it was still a digital camera, but like not as many.
Yeah.
Not as high resolution as it is as they are now. But
right.
Also, I'm shooting through glass. This is like at a children's museum.
Yep.
Like in one of those like the whole room is dark except for these lights here.
Love it.
And I was basically just following my son. Go through looking at all the things like, oh, look at this. Oh, I want to see this. Oh, I want to see this. And
in low light.
Yes.
In low light settings. So, man, I got to give you your credit.
And if you've ever tried to photograph like 2-year-olds or that they don't stay still very long.
No, they don't.
But I wanted to bring this because like one, when you say curious, this image comes up to me because of the look on his face. And I love that. That's why this was one of my favorite images, regardless that it's not sharp or anything, but
right. And I'm just giving you a little bit of grief out of just, tongue-in-cheek grief, because yes, this is a lower resolution camera. You can only expect so much out of your camera as far as having, high quality megapixels and sensors and so forth. So you have some limitations there, but at the end of the day, it's all about the story, and you told a story here.
Thanks.
I give you your credit there. You said what comes to your mind was the look on his face, and I agree with you 100% on that. What gets me is I'm going to go ahead and open up my editing tools. Sorry, I had to do it. What gets me
brought it on.
Is just, let me rotate it just a touch like that, and then I'm going to crop it slightly here and really crop it over there like that. Maybe even bring it back out this way. And the reasoning behind that is because it puts him on a certain side of the frame. And take a look at your son's eyes. So now his eyes are, if you can just draw a line, he's looking over here. There's nothing there. So we're like, as a viewer, what is he looking at?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So that was just a simple crop. And just straighten it out a little bit. But I love this shot, and I love the expression, like you said, and just where his eyes are going, and just it truly shows curiosity there. And again, kudos to you, because this is a low light environment, and I know he wasn't sitting still.
Right.
I know he wasn't. I don't know a child that sits still. Heck, I don't know many teenagers that'll sit still.
If I was more, if this happened more like, a few years later or even a year later with what I knew, and how like 2-year-olds operate in a museum, I would camp out at the spot and basically try to tell him, go over here, look at this, look at this, look at this. And then, and then that,
and just sort of wait on him to hit the mark.
Yep. And this is where back button focus would come in handy, because you can set your focus right then.
Yep.
And that's why I brought this one on, like an old shot, because what you've been talking about the past few weeks, on what are we on, the 17th episode, on the past 16
somewhere
episodes
in that area,
this I made an effort to try to dig up this shot because I wanted to do things like what you were showing with sharpening and all that stuff in Lightroom that I never knew that I could do in the past when I took this photo, which was like maybe even 10 years ago.
Right.
Well,
that's the beauty of this stuff.
But,
you can see where your growth has
Yes.
come in the world of just framing the shots, and then in the world of actual post-processing. It takes a lot of practice and a lot of hours of just sitting down and doing the work. And you look back at these old images, and sometimes you'll cringe and say, "Oh my goodness, I shot that. What was I thinking?" You know, and and then you say, "You know what? I've come a long way," and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. But man, I really did enjoy that shot.
As a parent, this is one of the shots that would be like my desktop image for a long time. You know, on my laptop and at work and stuff. And then when you look close at it, of course, as a photographer, you see it's not sharp, it's not in focus. But like I said, I brought it on because I wanted to say again. I can totally do sharpening and stuff with what I've learned from you in Lightroom and all that, which is one of the things I wanted to do in the future. So
the thing is, it's not as sharp, but what you should see in this shot, based on your environment, is a ton of noise. And I don't see it.
Yes.
I don't see it. So again, you did something right. You were able to hit the mark, and that, again, that's a credit to you. Knowing your environment, knowing, how to get the proper exposure. Let me see what you shot this at. F1.8.
Yeah.
Nice. F1.8. So you were able to pull in as much light as possible. That shutter is slowed down just a little bit to 1/60 of a second, and ISO 400. Yeah, that's. And you knew what you were doing.
Thanks. And to kind of like nerd out with how old this digital camera was, this, like I said, this was probably 10 years ago.
Yeah. This
was one of those digital cameras where I was afraid to shoot at ISO 800 because of the noise.
Oh man, yeah. Yeah, once you got above 400, it was like donezo. Yeah. Wow, we have come a long way in our tech, man.
Yeah.
Long way. That's awesome, Mr. Victor.
I'll tell him to be 2 years old again. Take him back to that museum, and I'll camp out at that spot.
Let's go back there, camp out, and I need you to pose this way.
Yes.
Got it? Good stuff, my man.
I got a faster lens now. I can take a better picture.
Man, but that was a fast lens. That was an f1.8. Yeah. That wasn't too shabby, dude. Goodness. Nice lens for you to be starting out with. I didn't see a f1.8 for a long time.
Right.
Jeez. Nice, man. All right. Well, that was good stuff. And again, folks out there checking this out, just challenge yourself. I'm going to do another challenge here in another week or two, another one-word challenges. Just give me a couple days to think about something, and I'm going to present it to you again. And I'm going to urge you to take the time and get up and shoot. Even if it's just shooting in your living room or in your backyard or something. Just think outside of the box, if you will, and just work your way through the actual composition based on the term presented to you. All right. So now we're going to go ahead and take a few minutes and thank this week's sponsor. This episode of Hands on Photography is brought to you by Masterclass. Learn from the best with exclusive access to online classes taught by masters of the craft with over 75 different instructors across many categories. Learn the art of filmmaking from Spike Lee, or even storytelling from Mr. Neil Gaiman, or better yet, this is a photography show. Why not give Miss Annie Leibovitz a try? Her class on photography is outstanding. I did it myself. I highly recommend you check it out. Get unlimited access to every masterclass and get 15% off your annual all-access pass when you go to masterclass.com/hop. That's masterclass.com/hop for 15% off. Thank you, Masterclass. We really appreciate the support. All right. This week, let's go ahead and dive into the lesson plan, if you will. Inside of your photo editor, whether it's Lightroom, Photoshop, Lightroom Mobile, Snapseed, quite a few apps out there have what's called a curves adjustment. And I don't want people to think that curves adjustment means you're going to be warping your image and changing things as far as the actual dimensions and structure. Curves is a little bit different. We're going to take the information that we've learned in the previous episodes where we talked about the histogram and talked about selective color adjustments, and we're going to combine that into one tool, and that's the Curves tool. I'm going to be using Lightroom for the most part, but I'll also show you inside of Photoshop, and I'll also show you inside of Lightroom CC. I don't think they call it Lightroom CC. Lightroom Classic and then Lightroom. That's how it should be named, yes. I think. Right? Okay, you got me right. But if you use just the regular Lightroom that's on your computer, it looks very, very similar to the version that's on your iPad or on your mobile phone. And if you had the full version, you'll be able to access the Curves adjustment tool. But again, if you don't have that app, you can check it out on Snapseed. You can check it out on the app that I just demoed on All About Android a couple days ago. That was called PhotoMate. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up Lightroom here on my computer, and we'll pull up our first image here. So now this is a shot, you know, again, you've probably seen this before. We worked on it in another demo, I believe. If we were to go through all of the adjustments over here on the right-hand side in Lightroom, it's nothing to it. It's just moving the slider, updating the exposure, moving the highlights down, so on and so forth. Now, if we scroll down to this Tone Curve tool, this Tone Curve tool does pretty much the same thing that these sliders will do, okay? Now, the difference is, if you look right there, there's a little setting that says channel, and that's dealing with the RGB, red, green, or blue. You can use 4 different types of curves adjustments. When you're only doing the RGB, that's essentially moving these different sliders up and down. And what I like about the curves adjustment in these particular apps is it gives you a histogram in the background. So if you look at the histogram here, it's very similar to the histogram at the top of the menu there. Okay, pretty much the same form. So now I want to go ahead and say take down just the midtones just a touch, just for the heck of it. And it's as simple as just clicking one time on the line to put a point, and then you just drag it down with your mouse. So as I'm dragging it down, notice the histogram is changing up here at the top, and it's putting more data down into the shadow section of the image. Okay, so what if I'm thinking, it's still a little bit underexposed, and if you're looking at your histogram, you see your highlights are a little flat, and you see your exposure is a little flat. So look at your curves, add a point, push it up. And it's going to give you a little bit more exposure, like so. And if it's still a little bit too flat, the beauty of the curves is you can take these points and move them around to fit your scene. So I'm going to click on this one particular point again in the shadows because I still think it's underexposed. Whoops, undo. And I'm just going to push that point up some more, like that. And you notice the histogram change, and you notice the exposure started to come up a little bit more. And a popular technique when dealing with the curves on the RGB channel is creating what's called an S-curve. And if you look at this image right now, this is pretty much just a inclining line. So it's not necessarily shaped like an S. But if you pull this point to the center, pull that down, pull those shadows up just a touch like that, you start to see a difference, and you start to see a much better exposed image. And ideally, if you can start out by creating an S curve, you will almost hit the mark every single time on your shots adjustments, depending on how poorly you underexpose or overexpose, right? So we can move that there. And now that looks pretty good. And it's just a simple little S curve. So now let's take a look at the actual channels. We can think back to our previous discussion about selective color adjustments, where we talked about adjusting the red saturation in the hues. So let's go to the red channel and see what happens. Now, look at the right side here. Look, this is saying in the highlight spots of the image, the red is super duper spiked up and high. And yeah, it clearly is. Look at his shoes. They stand out. That's the first thing you see. You see the red shoes before you see the white shirt. So if you want to tone down that red a little bit, just grab that top portion of the curves and just drag it down. And it starts to tone it down. And you notice the histogram up here at the top. Notice the histogram has the red channel moving out of that highlight section in whites, and it's starting to move more towards the exposure. It still doesn't look all of that great because that introduced other problems. The image now has sort of a greenish teal tint to it. That's not ideal, right? Well, let's go ahead and look at that channel. Go into the greens. And you'll notice that there's a spike yet again on that side of the histogram. So let's just try to bring it down and tone it down just a touch. So now that red is a little bit softer and the image doesn't look nowhere near as green. Okay, so now let's go back to our histogram and let's see if we notice anything else. So we look at the top histogram. Now we see there's a blue shift over there, over in the right-hand side of the histogram. So let's try to push that back and get it further into balance. So we'll go back to the curves tool and we'll hit blue like so. And then we'll just push that down to bring it back into balance with the rest of the channels there. There you go. So now let's take a look at the histogram again. And we'll notice now that those three channels are grouped together a little bit better. So you don't see that one is sort of overpowering the other when you look at the image. That red on the shoes is not as vibrant and loud as we first saw it. And that's okay, that fixes the problem. Now, granted, there's some other issues. It did change the overall exposure. So you will have to consider that with the different sliders like so. The blacks, whites, shadows, like such. There you go. There. That's a little bit better. Okay. So now that's curves working with it inside of Lightroom. And again, you want to use this curves adjustment layer depending on the type of image that you have. You can use it to just flat out manipulate it and change the whole look of the image. If you want to give it more of a red tint, you can just go into that red channel and crank it up and your image is just going to have more of a red tint. It just depends on the look that you're trying to present. So now I'm going to open up another image here inside of Photoshop. This image is from TWiT's very own, our colleague, Mr. Jason Howell. He shot this with his Pixel on a vacation not too long ago, and holy crap, isn't that pretty?
Yeah, nice.
That is really nicely done. Now, I'm looking at this image, and from an exposure standpoint, it looks okay. And if you look inside of Photoshop, you'll see that I have my curves adjustment layer already open and popped out. Ideally, this is what it would look like when you click on curves. Scroll down, hold on. There we go. This is what it would look like ideally inside of Photoshop. You would go to the adjustment layer menu and just select curves, and it'll pop it up right there. And then when you click on this little icon, you'll be able to see the properties of your curves, just like you would inside of Lightroom. And the beauty of Photoshop is you can move these panels all around to, however you see fit. And just for the sake of this particular video, I'm going to just drag this out so it's a little more visible to everybody. Okay. And now, just like we had inside of Lightroom, we have the different channels that we can adjust. And when I saw this sunset, I wanted to look at a little more of a blue and orange feel to it because it's a sunset, and I think it would just make it pop a little bit more. So I'm going to adjust red in the blue channel. Okay. So I'm going to start down with the blue. I'm going to take this shadow area, bring it down just a little bit, but I'm going to bring the midpoint up just a touch more, like that. And see, what happened was it was able to give me more blue tint to the sky and took away a lot of the blue tint that was found down here in the bottom of the image in the shadow spots of the image. Okay. So now let's go to the reds. And we'll play around with this. We could really have fun with this. Look at the way the histogram is laying out for the red channel. It's a lot of data to play with. A good bit here in the shadows and the midtones and in the exposure, not so much in the highlights, which is okay. So I want to try to push this up even more. And as I pushed it up, it started to mess around with the sky. See, now the sky doesn't quite look as blue. So maybe I'll just add another point right here and just drag it back down a little bit. So now that's putting it a little bit more orange and red down in the shadow area, which is where I wanted it, not in the sky. Something like that. Something like that. The Curves tool is really powerful and gives you just so many different options. I'm curious about the green. A lot of green data in here, particularly on the shadow side. But what happens if I just take it all the way down? Now we get a nice magenta. Something like that. So we'll take the green down, then we'll go back to the blue, push the blue up just a touch more. Something like this. Chat room says Jason is on Mars. I didn't know Mars looked that nice. If it looked that nice, send me to Mars. Let's go back here to the red. There we go. All right, I dig that. Okay, so now you can see the difference here. Let me go back to our layers. So we'll just hide this over here, like so. You're supposed to hide. There you go. All right, so we'll go back to our layers. We'll turn it off. That's the before, and this is the after. Okay, good stuff. So now let's say you don't have Photoshop and you just have Lightroom on your iPad, and you're still going to have the same tools. You get your histogram up in the upper right of the screen. You have your exposure, all of your sliders that you're used to seeing. But they hide the Curves tool inside of Lightroom Mobile and Lightroom CC or whatever it's called now. So they hide it right here in this tiny little button. You click on it, and I like the way this Curve tool is presented, even though they tried to hide it. We still have our channels here, as we saw in those different drop-down boxes, but this time they're just designated radio buttons. This is the regular RGB. Red, green, blue, so on and so forth. But watch what happens if I decide to make an adjustment to the blue channel. So when I click on it, it gives me the data and it lets me know the blue is really, really spiked in the shadows. But if I were to take it down, it's telling me you're going to go more into a yellow tint. Why? Because the opposite of blue in the spectrum is yellow. And that can be pretty valuable to some people depending on your post-processing. So I'm going to take it down and watch as I take it down, it'll start to get more yellow. See? And when I let go, notice the histogram changed. There's still a little bit of blue data up there in the blacks and shadows, but nowhere near as much as it was. And let's see, I'm going to push it back up. I don't want it totally gone from blue. We'll push it back down. And now, similar to the blue channel, we'll go to red or green. You can still see the opposite and complementary colors that could be adjusted. And if you ever click on it and decide that, hey, I didn't mean to put a point there, you can just double click to delete the point and it'll reset it back to the default. I want to go back to that magenta side just a little bit like that. Then I'm going to click on the red and I'm going to do an S curve on the red. So we're bringing it up a little bit in the highlights, bringing it down in the middle, and then we're going to bring it right back up down here just a touch. Just a touch. And this is just where you can be creative and figure out, do I need any more points? If you want, you can add more points and get super duper granular like this. I don't recommend that If you got to do that, I say go back to your main sliders and take a look at some of the adjustments there first, because that can get really complicated if you got way too many points and you don't get as much control as you think you will. But I like something like this. Pretty stuff. And finally, RGB. Bring the highlights up just a touch because I like that flare for now. And boom, there's an adjustment. We could do a lot more on this, but I just wanted to show the power that you can have right there at your fingertips or at the tip of your mouse with the curves adjustment tool. And again, you can have different variations of the curve tool. Notice that this says point and tone. When I clicked on it to make it tone, it changed it to where it's all slider based like that. And that may work for you, but in my opinion, if you're going to do the slider based curves, why not just stick to these actual sliders up here at the top? You get a lot more control when you use a point curve. All right, so I just reset it back. Okay, cool. So that's it. You play around with the curves, Mr. Victor?
I do. I do like how the visualization now, like with the complementary colors on it, like I can throw away that color wheel I keep at my desk.
Yeah. Oh, so you do that too?
Yes.
Oh, I'm not the only one. Yes, I will hop over. I have a file in my Creative Cloud documents, and it's just a simple color wheel. And all it does is let me know if I'm looking at red, what's on the other side of red, so I can think about complementary and what's going to work best for that shot. And if I'm looking at blue, it's probably going to be yellow over on this side. So I will try to work with that. And that stuff helps when it comes to design, and especially like if you're working on logos or things like that. When marketing companies are putting together logos, whether it be for Nike or the Lakers or whatever, every last one of those designs went through a phase of figuring out what their primary color is and what their secondary color is, and how do they work from a complementary standpoint. That's why they look as good as they look. You know, the purple and the gold of the LA Lakers, it looks good for a reason. It's the science of it. It's a beautiful thing. So if you're doing your post-processing, don't be ashamed to pull up a color wheel in the middle of your desktop or something, just to have it there as a reference, because it can make a big difference in the mood and make a big difference in just bringing a different life to your shot. So take advantage of it.
I'm not just talking about just red and green, or yellow and blue, right?
Yep.
Yellow and blue. Like there's, all the.
Yeah,
like if you have
it's a full gradient,
$1 or $2 color wheel at Michael's or something, like it has the gradients and stuff that really helps out.
Yep,
so,
it's a full gradient. Yeah. It's not just your primary; it's a full gradient. And again, one of the most popular that you'll see today, if you scroll through the big Instagram pages, is the orange and teal side of things. Because orange is not right there with the rest of the primaries, but that teal definitely isn't. But those colors work together really, really well. So again, just play around with it, and you'll see a big difference in, what your shot started out with versus the final product and the mood and just the life that it brings. Okay. All right. So that's going to do it for this week's show. I tried not to take too long. I hope I didn't. Whew. I never know anymore, Mr. Victor.
No, it's just about the right amount of time.
Just about the right amount of time. Thank you kindly, my friend. Thank you kindly. I appreciate everybody checking us out each and every week here at TWiT.tv. Again, take that time, hit that subscribe button. Just hop on over to TWiT.tv/hop and check out the different subscriptions options there. And then be sure to share it out with others so they can find out what's going on over here at LastPass Studios and TWiT and hands-on photography. It really does mean a lot. And also, folks, while you're on that page, you can check out some of our other shows here at the network. We just launched a new show called Hands on Android, and also Hands on iOS, featuring my buddies, my colleagues, my coworkers, Mr. Jason Howell and Mr. Micah Sargent. Those shows just kicked off here, and they are going to just be awesome content for you to get in and get some quick tips and tricks on the world of iOS. And there's some more shows coming down the pike really, really soon, so stay tuned. And also, don't be afraid to hop into the online forums. That's twit.community, where we'll hop in there and sit there and chit chat about any and everything, whether it's something about this week's show, last week's show, Tech News Weekly, or chips versus French fries. Doesn't matter. Anything.
I was looking at it yesterday, and I think there's even a photo feed.
There's a photo thread in there. Each week, a couple of our members will set up a dedicated photo thread for the week that'll allow you to go on there and just post your favorite shots of the week. And people will critique, people will encourage, and let you know what they used and just the thought process. It's really, really good stuff.
Yeah, the interaction was great. I mean, it's not.
It's
nobody's
really
mean and
we don't have any of that foolishness going on. It's good stuff. All right, folks, that is it for this week. Tune in next week, next Thursday, around 2 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. I don't know, somewhere in that area. If you got your notification set on your podcatcher, you'll get it right on time. And if you ever want to watch the show live, just go to live.twit.tv and you'll be able to catch us while we're recording it and listen to all of my flubs and screw ups and all of that good stuff that just shows you that I'm just a step below perfect. All right, we will catch you all on the next show. Thank you again for the support. Get on out there, create and dominate, and I'll catch you next time. See ya.